What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Post-Gazette Pirates YouTube channel. Noah Hiles coming to you on a beautiful Monday here in the Steel City. Pirates hit the road to Milwaukee. Rather than previewing that series, I kind of want to talk about something that I feel like might be a big storyline for the remainder of this season and the beginning of next season. The main strength of the Pirates from top to bottom when you're looking at their roster, not just in the major leagues, but all the way down to the low levels, is pitching. But how reliable of a strength is that going to be due to the injuries suffered by a lot of the people who will likely be starting games for this team next season? We're going to talk all about that in this video or podcast if you're watching or listening. But before we do so, I want to remind everyone to head over to post-gazette.com to check out all of my work, all of Colin Beasley's work. He's my beat partner, and just all of our coverage for everything in the city of Pittsburgh and its surrounding communities. You can get yourself a digital subscription if you don't have one already, and check out our print product at post-gazette.com. Okay, so we're talking about pitching today. Looking at it, the Pirates, on a positive note, I've wrote down 10 guys who I think could likely start games for the Pirates next year, who are already in this organization. 8 of them are on the 40-man roster. I think 8 of them have started games for the team this year. Yes. And then the other 2 will probably be here by the end of the season. Those names include Paul Skenes, Mitch Keller, Carmen Mlodzinski, Mike Burrows, Braxton Ashcraft, Hunter Barco, Johan Oviedo, Jared Jones, Bubba Chandler, and Thomas Harrington. So 7 of those guys have started games because Jared, Bubba, and Barco have not started a game for the Pirates in the majors this season. Bubba and Barco might. I think Bubba definitely will. And Jared won't because he's out for the season. But those are 10 guys that the Pirates have already in their organization who, going into the offseason, they can anticipate being an option to start major league games next year. That's a strength. There aren't many teams that have a group of 10 with a higher upside, a higher collective upside value than that group. But how high is this upside when you really get into it? A common trend, and I plan on writing about this later in the week, a common trend that I noticed being discussed this past weekend against the Reds was usage. Braxton Ashcraft and Mike Burrows, 2 guys who started this weekend against Cincinnati, have both already exceeded their career high in innings pitched. Ashcraft right now, between AAA and the major leagues, has thrown 85 innings. His career high entering this season at any level of baseball was 73 innings, which was last year. And that was a big year for him as he was coming off a pretty big surgery. So 73. So he's already 12 over his career high. Burrows eclipsed his career high yesterday. Or actually, he had just eclipsed it the start prior. But between AAA and the majors now, he is at 100 combined innings. His career high prior to this year was 94 and a third. So you have 2 guys who have already eclipsed their career highs in innings pitched. Another common theme between Burrows and Ashcraft is both of those guys have already had Tommy John. So their workload means a little bit more than someone who's naturally progressing. These guys have both reached the major leagues. They're both pretty effective major league pitchers so far their rookie seasons. But they both have some injury history, and neither prior to this year had eclipsed 100 innings pitched on the season. So their workloads are going to be heavily monitored, I would think, for the remainder of the year. Don Kelly even talked about that a little bit. And again, I plan on looking into this more as the week unfolds. And it also led me to kind of look into a lot of the other names that I just listed. Right now, among this group of 10, I divided them into 4 categories, 4 tiers. Tier 1 are the sure things. These are the guys who I think going into next year, you can bank on them giving you 200 plus innings if you need them to. There are 2 guys in this category, Paul Skenes, Mitch Keller. Keller's career high is 194 and a third. He did that 2 seasons ago. He's sitting at 137 and 2/3 right now. I don't know if he'll get to 200 this year, but he is experienced enough where if he goes 200, it wouldn't be that big of a deal for him. It would be a career high, but he can regularly sit in that 190 range and feel comfortable. Hasn't had really any injury scares in his career either, so that's good to know for him. Paul Skenes, he's on pace to get close to that 200 mark. I think he could well eclipse that next year, and I don't think it would be an issue. I think he's just physically built to probably throw more innings in baseball than anyone else in the sport right now. The next tier I have are guys that I categorize as young and healthy. These three guys are also all really unproven. Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington, and Carmen Mlodzinski are the three that I throw into this category. All three of them have logged a 100-plus inning season prior to the start of this year. Or actually, no, that is true. Carmen's career high in innings pitched is 105 and a third. He did that in 2022, back when he was still a traditional starter. And Harrington has thrown 117 and a third last year. Chandler threw 119 and 2/3 last year. Harrington's over 100 this year. Chandler sitting at 96 and 2/3 after his start over the weekend. So both of those guys, they're going to probably top out at around 120 this year, which is similar to where they were last year. That's fine. You feel good about a minor league prospect, guys who are probably going to pitch in the majors. If they've thrown around 120 in back-to-back seasons, that's good. That prepares them to be at around 150, 160 to where we saw Paul as a rookie, that type of workload last year. So that's where they're probably going to be at, if not a little higher. Maybe these guys can creep into the 130s, maybe even the 140 territory if things go incredibly well. Carmen, a little different. He's at 88 and 2/3. He'll still probably get to 100 or get close to it, just because I think they're going to bullpen him a lot. But all three of those guys, the health isn't a huge concern. You might have to monitor their workload a little bit, but they're all very unproven. Bubba hasn't made a major league start. Harrington has not looked good in the major leagues in any capacity. And Carmen Mlodzinski's a really good reliever, but did not look good as a starter. So that's tier 2. Tier 3, you have guys who I deemed young, but with some mileage, and not the good kind. Ashcraft and Burrows are in that category. Burrows was a part of a slow build-up plan this year, similar to Bubba Chandler. I think his was more out of necessity because last year he was returning from Tommy John. He only threw 54 and 2/3 innings last year, so he's close to doubling that already. So I would expect him to have some pauses here, maybe some skip starts, maybe some bullpen days. That's not inside information, just looking at it. I mean, I don't know how much more they want to throw onto his arm. I mean, do you really want to put him in a spot where he's coming close to throwing 80 to 90 more innings in a season? I know he had a low workload last year because of injury, but it's worth considering. I mean, Ashcraft is a guy they've been very vocal about protecting with his workload buildup. Again, career high innings, just 73. He's at 85 this year. He's someone who's had a multitude of injury troubles since his professional career started. Someone that I think they would love to make a starter, but I don't know if that's ever going to be a realistic possibility with where his arm is at and where his health has been in his young pro career. And then you have Hunter Barco, a guy who entering this season, his career high innings pitch was 66. He's already at 80. He's probably going to eclipse that 100 inning marker this year. But again, how much can you ask him to throw next year if his career high in innings pitched is 100? And again, this is a guy who's already had Tommy John. So that's the young and with some concerns, with some miles, however you want to say it. All guys who are in their build back phase, who have all had Tommy John in the last couple of years and have not thrown 100 innings in a season prior to this year. So those are three guys to watch out for. And then in the last group I have, I called it the recovery group. And in those two, the two in that category are Jared Jones and Johan Oviedo. Oviedo obviously coming back this year from Tommy John and the lat injury. He is only at 21 total innings this year, and he threw his career high is 177 and 2/3, which was in 2023. But that workload led him to get Tommy John and miss all of last year. So Oviedo, I mean, with 21 innings, we're recording this on August 11th. He's got a chance to maybe finish it around 50-ish, maybe 60. Who knows? But like, it's not going to be a huge total. So what can you ask him to do next year? And then Jared Jones, a guy who had the appropriate buildup throughout the minor leagues. Jared, in the last 3 seasons, finished anywhere between 120 to 126 innings pitched throughout the minor leagues. And then in his first major league season, he threw 121 and 2/3 last year. But he missed all of this season. So what can he do workload wise? The reason I bring this all up is because they're going to have an interesting puzzle to put together next year with this rotation, especially if they're trading Mitch Keller in the offseason, which I expect them to do. He's someone that can bring in a big league bat. They need a big league bat. But when you remove Keller from this equation, it gets a little bit more complicated on how you're going to get all of these innings covered through reliable production. Some of the guys that you think can be good, right? Jones and Oviedo, we've seen them have good major league seasons, but they're both going to be on, I think, a sizable workload restriction next year. Guys who have promise, like Burrows and Ashcraft, solid rookies. They could take on a little bit more, but both of them had some restrictions this year as well. You can't start Burrows on a slow build next year. And do you let him get to 160? Would you feel comfortable doing that, considering that this is his first year as a pro, eclipsing 100? And Ashcraft, I mean, can you even, like I said, rely on him being a starter? Barco is a guy that I think they have to do the slow build like they did with Skenes and Chandler and Burrows this year. I don't think you can allow him to have a full spring training. I think you have to let him slow build. That way, when he's fully stretched out, you're already into May. I think that makes sense. That's the only way you can really get the most out of him. Which brings us into the group where there's no real concerns. And that group, excluding Keller now, is Paul Skenes. Feel pretty good about him. Bubba Chandler, still not here in the major leagues. And, I mean, you'd assume he's going to have some sort of restriction. They probably want him at around, 170 next year, max. And we don't know what he can do yet. Harrington, who struggled, and Mlodzinski, who struggled. So you've got some talent, but you also have a lot of restrictions to take into account, especially, like I said, if you trade Mitch Keller this offseason. So how do you account for all of this? I think a couple of routes can be taken. One, I think we could see certain guys be given the Braxton Ashcraft plan. Guys, they identify and say, look, we're going to ask you to throw big innings this year, but it doesn't make sense for us to expect you to be a starter. So maybe we see them take a similar approach with Jared Jones next year or Johan Oviedo, where they're just long relief options or maybe piggyback options. Maybe they do that with Harrington just to get him more acclimated to the major leagues as well. Carmen Mlodzinski certainly seems to thrive in that role. Is it worth pushing him out of it? And like I said earlier, they could also take the slow build approach. I expect them to do that with Hunter Barco. I think he's a perfect candidate, a guy who's going to well exceed his innings career high, and someone who I think is going to be an asset to next year's team, but I don't think you can expect Hunter Barco to make the opening day roster because they're going to need to slowly build him up. So he can't be fully stretched out until May, and that allows him to really take off and log the majority of his innings next year at the game's highest level, like we saw with Skenes last year and like we're seeing with Burrows this year. So that leads me to ask, who's on the opening day rotation next year? Like I said, you got Paul Skenes. You probably have Burrows. Who else? Bubba Chandler, like I said, still isn't here. Are you going to bank on that guy to make your opening day rotation next year? If he hasn't thrown a major league inning yet? Seems like a gamble. I mean, you have Carmen, you have Harrington, who are already on the 40-man roster. You have Ashcraft. They're going to have to do a lot of plug and play. Maybe start guys in the rotation and then move them back to the bullpen, or vice versa. Start them in the bullpen and then work their way up, something like we saw with Luis Ortiz last season. Or you might have to spend some of that money that they've been talking about, building that money that they can reinvest. That's part of the reason why they traded Bednar, part of the reason why they traded Ke'Bryan Hayes. You're going to have more if, you trade Keller away, and if you don't bring back IKF, Tommy Pham, Kutch, Heaney, Meza, Baraki. You'll have money to spend, but a lot of people are expecting that to go into the offense. But when you look at everything here, some of that might have to be spent on pitching as well. Now, how much of it, I don't know. But I think especially, you're losing Heaney, who's covered a decent amount of innings this year, and Keller, who's covered a ton of innings for his whole time here. You're going to need some veterans, I think, and I said veterans, plural, to at least start the season until these younger, higher ceiling guys are at a point where you feel comfortable throwing them in there and allowing them to take on any sort of significant workload. Like I said, I plan on looking into this more throughout the week. I'll be in Chicago this weekend for the team's 3-game weekend series at Wrigley Field. Part of the plan for me, I'm going to talk to some guys about this, maybe talk to some coaches as well. You can check out that story, which will be coming this weekend, at post-gazette.com. And you can check out all of our work at post-gazette.com. I'm Noah Hiles. Thank you for tuning in to the Post-Gazette Pirates YouTube channel and podcast network. Shout out to our sponsors, FanDuel and Greenewalt Roofing. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.